it's so much easier to build, to create, because of all this new technology. What used to take us 8 months is now taking us 4 to 6 weeks to be able to build. And that's only going to accelerate. So if there's any potential to be able to create something, there's never been a time when it's easier to do than now.
I'm Dr. Louise Massara, and this is the Future Health Podcast. You have a vision, you're driven by passion, and the tools are literally at your fingertips. In today's tech-enabled world, are there fewer barriers to taking a great idea and making it a reality than ever before? Is anything possible for Generation Z? Today, we talk to Jesse Waller, the co-founder and CEO of InnerSteps. He's developed an innovative mental health platform to address the critical gaps in early intervention support for children, transforming how kids understand and manage worry through AI-powered personalised storytelling. InnerSteps has quickly become Australia's most awarded technology platform, earning prestigious recognition, including the Global E-Learning Platform of the Year and Australian Education Solution of the Year. In recognition of his contributions to social impact and innovation, Jesse was recently named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Welcome, Jesse. Okay, we better set the scene for people that don't know exactly what it is that your product is. Can you explain what you're doing?
So yeah, what we're doing at its core is AI-driven storytelling for young children's mental health. So we take a child's favorite colors, their animals, their interests, as well as what they're struggling with. And then we pair that with all the top psychological research and create a complete cognitive behavioral therapy program that can help them understand and potentially overcome each of their concerns. And this is all delivered through completely custom, interactive picture books and audiobooks, where they're at the core of their journey. They have all the things they love most in life. That's their blue dinosaur or their pet or their whatever pet they have. And we can bring all of that together through a clinically sound program that can be delivered in over 100 languages and 5,000 cultural contexts to anyone around the world.
We know young people little kids love to reread and reread. Mm-hmm. Does your story change, or is it a sort of a static story that we're telling?
So it changes every time. So completely custom to each child, no matter how many millions of times it's created, even with the same information, it'll be brand new to them each and every time. And I totally agree. I know when I was younger, I used to love rereading books and everything like that. And so what we can do is we evolve these stories. So they're chapters with the same characters. They're in these stories themselves. And so they go through different adventures. They learn, they grow at the exact same pace that they do in real life. Because we've got all these interactive decisions that actually allow them to choose whether they go to space or go down to the forest or whether they make one decision or the other, we can really progress it at the same stage that each child is, meaning this is so hyper-personalized in a way that was just never possible before.
Like the rereading is great for the kids, sometimes frustrating for the reader. I'm thinking about at certain stages of development, are your books able to read to the kids as well as sort of have the kids reading the books?
Yeah, so they're completely custom audiobooks as well, not only just with narrators, but with each character speaking to the child, helping them make decisions, move through these stories, and in a way that is super personalized to them. There's something that we're integrating, which is a little bit scary, but also really cool. It means that we can have a grandparent's voice and their actual voice in these stories. They feel like they're going on adventures with people in their lives.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. So did it start as a university project?
Yes, and initially I actually started as a university project. It was, again, co-founder Matt's idea back at the University of Sydney. He took a class, an elective that he didn't really want to take, almost dropped it after 2 weeks, but instead decided to go through with it because he needed the course. And he kept going, he kept building. He had this fantastic idea and really dedicated himself to it and got a fantastic mark. I was over living in Canada at the time. As soon as I got back, I said to him, this is incredible. We've both got this passion, we've both got this experience. How can we not at least try and make this into something that we know we can help? And so that was the very, very early beginnings of where we started from.
I mean, I talked to you for 1 second, I get a sense of there's an energy behind you. Was this the first sort of entrepreneurial idea that you've been involved in?
I guess the biggest entrepreneurial idea, like I've always liked to consider myself entrepreneurial, doing little businesses, commission, secondhand selling or tutoring businesses and things like that. But in terms of what is a scalable startup that can affect people on a global scale, for me, this was a first.
Well, that's a really interesting question. So how do you take a university project and scale it with ambitions to be an international sort of success?
Well, I would love to say it's just an overnight,
One, two, three,
exactly, overnight thing where you just go one to the other to the next. But really, it's taking those stages. It's going from the idea to building out those concepts, getting people behind it, getting support from New South Wales government or from even University of New South Wales and then investors. And it's really stage after stage. So you can't leap to that international. And we're not even quite at the international level yet. But we know we've got those stages. We've planned them out. We've built them. And so it's just about moving forward with the product, with the build, and what we've created.
Okay, so it's the steps. But are the steps easier than you imagine they would be?
It's a hard question. And I would love to say, like, yes, it was the easiest thing and inspire everyone. Like, why wouldn't you become an entrepreneur? Like, seriously. And to some extent, yes, I think that everyone has got the ability. And as long as you have the drive, you have the potential. But there are challenges that come with it. I think one thing that's made it significantly easier is working with UNSW founders, who have been one of our biggest supporters through this process. We actually started at the university project and then built that up to the UNSW Peter Farrell Cup, which is Australia's biggest ideation competition. We won that, got our original funding, and they gave us that support to sort of go stage to stage. So we were really fortunate to have them in our corner, and that made it much easier. But at the moment, and I think even things have changed in the couple of years since I started, it's so much easier to build, to create because of all this new technology. What used to take us 8 months is now taking us 4 to 6 weeks to be able to build. And that's only going to accelerate. So if there's any potential to be able to create something, there's never been a time when it's easier to do than now.
Was there anything you had to overcome in yourself, in you as a person, to sort of back yourself on this journey? Because it's pretty brave to just say, hey, I've got a thing, it's really going to solve a problem. I'm a young guy, back me.
Yeah, and I think, yes, imposter syndrome is a serious thing, especially in the health field where everyone's got qualifications, everyone's older. It's a different experience. But I think that passion drives every single element of what we do. And if you don't have that belief and that passion, it's not going to turn into anything. So I think whilst there is difficulties in overcoming that imposter syndrome, you just have to do it. And that's what's needed to get to that next stage.
What's your vision for the future of health, and how is that sort of built into how you think about your business development and your product development?
I think health as a whole is going to become more, for lack of a better word, community focused. I think that there is such an overwhelm on almost every part of the health system, and we're starting to evolve technology that is never going to replace them, is never going to mean that doctors or psychologists aren't going to have a job anymore, but is going to alleviate that burden they currently have. And so I think as we move towards these more evolving technologies, it'll allow us to provide more access to more people at a higher quality than what's ever been possible before. And I think that's where the health system is really moving.
I'm conscious that you're a team of two.
Yeah.
We think a lot about in the innovation space of creating the vision and bringing people on and following your vision. Is it hard to create a single vision in a partnership? Do you think that's been a positive for you, or is it a bit of a challenge agreeing on the vision?
I think it's a positive. If I was to do this by myself, I have had some bad ideas. I've had some good ideas, but if I had no one to talk about them with, if I had no one to communicate, to realize what the benefits, what the detriments were, we would have gone down many wrong paths. So I think whilst it's sometimes hard to align your vision, you've both got different goals in some elements. It's really important that you have someone there. And Matt, who's been absolutely fantastic through this whole journey and has been one of my closest, not my best friend for the last 20 years, he has made this journey much better than it would have been otherwise.
We talked to a lot of people in this podcast space around how we can make big innovations for a whole of system. And, you know, we learn a lot about the steps that need to be taken. But when you take it down to two people with a great idea, I'm just wondering how influenced you've been by the educators around you versus sort of following your own path.
I mean, I think there's two completely separate avenues. There's the business part, which we have still been heavily influenced by the people around us, but we've also had to learn. And I think that's been a combination of us just putting our feet on the ground and moving forward, getting advice where we can. We've got some absolutely incredible people around us. But then there's also on the education and the psychological front, and those have been really led by the advisors and the people we work with. Because again, we're not psychologists. We don't pretend to be psychologists. We work with about 35 different clinical child psychs, and they really help us evolve that element of the business forward. But I will say, without our advisors, I don't know how much of this would be possible, because they have been beyond fantastic in helping us drive this to the next stage, not only with their advice, with their connections and their, I guess, general warmth.
The passion is a big piece for you, and you referenced some personal experience with friends and family who've gone through mental health challenges. Do you feel like your generation specifically are facing any unique mental health challenges that perhaps our older generations haven't battled with?
Yeah, I mean, I think anxiety has increased. And in my opinion, that's a large testament to social media. Connected technology is fantastic, but it is a highlight reel. And I think that impacts different individuals. Comparison's a thief of joy. And that, I believe, has had a rather significant impact on this new generation and will continue as the generations, not just domestically, but internationally, become more and more interconnected and compare themselves to each other too.
What was the impact of COVID on you and your friends?
Yes, that would be the other big aspect is that, yeah, COVID, I think, just on that note before, was a huge impactor. These young kids missed out years of not only learning, but the social experience where they were stuck at home, especially in Australia, where we had some more intense lockdowns. And that has been an impactor. And then I think on myself, it's made a big difference to our lives. There's years that we missed of what others have had. And whilst you can try and make up for them and do what you can, it's important to consider they're a part of our lives, they're a part of history. And they've had their benefits, they've had their detriments, but as a whole, just important to consider.
Is there any particular aspect of mental health that is a real sort of front of mind priority for you in this project?
At the moment, it's anxiety. Anxiety and worries are really our main focus. Not only is it the most commonly occurring mental health concern for these young kids, it's also something that we're able to solve, help children become more comfortable in themselves, in situations, and ultimately help them become that next stage of who they can actually be, because they've got all these contributing factors that we can help mitigate or emphasize depending on the positive and negative.
I'm really interested to get your perspective. If you were sort of giving our team some advice as to what we could do better for young people in the mental health space, what should we be focusing on? What should we be thinking about doing differently into the future?
I mean, I think this is a big focus for the health space anyway, but is that prevention, early intervention? It's so important to educate our young kids on these things. 50% of all mental health illnesses start before 14, and that statistic is getting younger and younger and younger. And so be able to impact and teach these young children these life lessons and life skills, even if they're not currently struggling with something, is quintessential, just as much as maths, just as much as science.
So it's an interesting thing, like young people are sort of struggling with the impact of the technology, but really we're using the technology to help them with the struggles of, like, it's complex, isn't it?
No, it's totally two-sided. And I agree. I think the technology has positive impacts, also has negative impacts. But most importantly, especially for this new generation, you have to meet them where they are at. And that is digitally.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can do things to be able to move them off those digital platforms, or in our case, moving on to better digital platforms.
You're absolutely right. I mean, they are, the generation now are going to be all tech natives. They will be literate in a way that I can't even imagine. It's that balance of the advantages and the disadvantages. But what do you think the advantages are of coming into the workforce as a young adult, being a tech native? Like, what does that bring to the workspaces that we have today?
I think that brings a whole new level of potential. And it's about harnessing that potential. I think every tech native is going to understand every aspect of new technologies. Of course, I'm biased using AI in my platform, but I think that is the future and where we are heading. And so having understanding on how to use it, more importantly, how to use it effectively, will give the new generation a complete leg up in the workforce as they move forward.
So you're not on the sort of panic AI is going to take over the world platform?
I think there are big risks, and it's incredibly important to mitigate those risks, and I'm all on board for that. But this is new technology. It will evolve regardless. We need to make sure that we use it for as many positives as possible.
Do you think having had the environmental impacts that your generation has had, that you sort of reprioritize certain attributes that are really going to set you guys up to solve some of the problems that we haven't yet solved?
Yeah, I think that new generations, as they come forward, are more and more socially, environmentally aware. And that awareness comes not only with just a general empathy, I imagine, but also with a more connected economy, more connected individuals. We can see what's happening around the world. We're no longer blind to it. And that's a big change on what we can make. And I think as we move forward, as we have this greater vision, as we have this ability to solve these bigger problems, we'll hopefully continue to make a difference.
So Jesse, I imagine this did not start 3 years ago. I imagine that as a person, there have been moments and influences in your life that have created the young man that we meet who's doing amazing things. Can you take us back to sort of young Jesse and maybe talk to us a little bit about what you think might have been some of the formative steps that have brought you here?
I think that even if we may not realize it, a lot of our inspiration comes back to our family, specifically our parents. And that is true for me. I have two fantastic parents who are both not only incredible at what they do, but also dedicated, but probably most importantly, passionate and happy to help. Specifically my mum, who is one of my heroes. And she, if anyone asks, she'll be there to help. She'll be on the front lines. She'll put in the hours, the work. And I think seeing them and how they operate has inspired me to want to emulate that as much as possible.
To be a young entrepreneur, you have to have a certain risk appetite that the average bear might not have. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it, again, definitely comes from people around me that I've seen. I also think that there is a balance that I've done. I've managed to sort of build all of this while still doing full-time university and holding down at least one other job. And so being able to balance that risk appetite so that once I graduate, it's financially in a position that I'm able to continue it has been really important. But yeah, I think that risk appetite comes from people around you, but also a bit of just my general nature. Some of my biggest passions are skiing and hiking and adventuring and pushing those limits. And I think that comes out in every aspect of my life, especially in the entrepreneurial stage.
So you really just recently out of formal education. So you're a great candidate for this question. Is the formal education that we're delivering at the moment adequately creating a job-ready sort of workforce? Or how much have you had to supplement outside of what you were formally educated to have you in this position of leading a startup and making a difference?
I think I'm in a more unique position because innovation entrepreneurship is one of the hardest things to teach. It's not anything that can be taught just in a course, not 100% taught in a course. There's a certain element that you have to do in person. And so taking my opinion with a grain of salt, I do think that there needs to be more done to make the education system more adept for what the current workforce is and what it's becoming. And that's learning to integrate the new technologies rather than holding each of the students back, whether that be in school or tertiary education. It should be encouraging. It should be enabling them to actually do the work they would be doing in the workforce. And I think there will be a big change coming soon that will allow students to be able to do that.
Were you given much exposure to experiential learning in your university course?
Yes, there was some exposure. And I think, and again, my university course, I enjoyed my course, but it wasn't the experiential learning that is for entrepreneurship as such, because that is really difficult. And so I think there is as much as possible that could be integrated. But as I mentioned, there are elements that will need to be improved as we go forward.
So we still live in a world where our sort of world leaders are, I think, average at 62 and our Fortune 500 company CEOs have an average age of late 50s. But it feels like we've got a generation of younger people who aren't sort of encumbered by a belief in hierarchy in the same way, the stepwise process to sort of leadership. They are tech natives and they have different approaches to how we're going to solve problems. Do you think we're about to have an overhaul of a sort of a young group of leaders really have an impact at maybe a much earlier stage than we're used?
Yeah, I think more than ever now, it's going to be individuals who are younger who are going to be leading these new waves. And that doesn't mean that there's any sort of uprising or complete change in hierarchy. I think there are just more opportunity. As I mentioned, building's easier, contacting the world is easier, and young people are more and more positioned to be able to do that. But there are still those hierarchical aspects, and they are important to our society because experience does count. So there's a balance to it. I think there's a potential, but there's not going to be a huge change in what's currently going on, in my opinion.
So the race is sort of on. We get all these new technologies and there are people like yourself right at the forefront wanting to take that technology and turn it into a solution. And we know government's responsibility around regulation is to make sure that we're creating as safe as possible environments, especially when we're not, a lot of these technologies are in their infancy. Do you think we're getting the balance right?
I think there's always a balance. The balance between safety, ensuring that the entire population is safe and not exposed to this risk, but also innovation. And it's something that every government has to compete inside sort of the regulatory bodies. I think the most important thing is that we need to open up conversation between the people who are building these new technologies, understanding how it can help, how it can reduce overwhelm, how we can provide that support, and government bodies to ensure that not only we can provide it, the service, in the way that benefits everyone, but also we know what we need to provide. I think that building out different regulatory frameworks and working on different panels and different aspects like that will make a huge difference in providing safe and quality innovation.
You've talked about your collaboration with the clinical psychologists as a group. How easy or difficult is it to sort of make your way and navigate through the health system so that you have opportunities to sort of present the work that you're doing to health institutions?
I think health institutions as a whole are in overwhelm, and that's especially prominent in psychology and child psychology. So what we've found, and been fortunate that child psychologists are supportive of something that can help kids before they reach that level. And so being able to talk to them, being able to get their advice, their opinions, has been something that we've been fortunate that they've been relatively open to. And so as we build forward, we'll start in these stages, but we will go through regulatory frameworks. We will look to go into more institutional health as we move forward with this technology.
We talked about the psychologists. What about kids and parents? Have you done sort of focus groups and the like with what's been some of the early responses?
Yeah, so we've done focus groups and interviews with hundreds of parents, getting understanding. And I think one of the biggest things we get is that parents are desperate for something to help. It's exhausting, it's hard, it's an unknown for the thing they care most about. And that was one of the biggest pieces of feedback we've got. I think also in terms of the platform itself, engagement is such a priority. There are so many engaging things in these young kids' lives. So making sure that they actually want to use it is such a core aspect of therapeutic effectiveness, that if we can combine that proven psychological aspects, that CBT, and bring that with a new modern engagement and combine them, that's, for lack of a better word, unstoppable combination.
You mentioned prevention as sort of one of the keys to the future, and I think everyone agrees we're all on that page. And I can see applications immediately with your sort of story methodology beyond maybe mental health even. There are lots of public health messages that I could see working really well. Is your remit at this stage mental health specifically, or do you see other portfolios that you could build out your story profiling into?
What we're specifically focusing on is more that mental wellness before it reaches again, it's a blurred line there, but before it reaches that mental health, those aspects. And I think I've got a big goal, a grand goal for what the platform can be. And at its core, we're providing personalised support for any child, anywhere, struggling with anything. We'll have our NDIS certification next month or two. We'll hopefully be in thousands of schools relatively soon, talking to some distributors. And so we have the potential to build out in that mental wellness space, but then also provide support in other aspects. And that can be for young kids, that can be in geriatric care, that can be for adults. And so there is so much potential. But it's important that we focus on what we're focusing on at the moment, do that as well as we know we can do it, and then build out from there.
I'm glad to hear you thinking about expansion into other areas. I mean, I think there's a big market for adult support in that mental wellness space, improved support around decision making. We have spoken earlier in earlier seasons about chatbots in that sort of mental wellness, wellbeing space as well. I suppose my point being, I can see a market for you well beyond the very young child. So it's an exciting potential evolution for you. What's going to be some of the biggest challenges in terms of reaching your intended audience as a non-health professional yourself? How do you manage the credibility piece with teachers and parents and the like?
I think there's two avenues. Is first of all, having people that work with us who have that credibility already.
Yep.
As you mentioned, the advisory board, but also within our team itself. We have some fantastic individuals who've worked for decades in this space and have that credibility, and working with them is that addition. And I think the second aspect is making sure that we build that credibility, we build that evidence base, we do tests, we work with pilot customers, we sort of do that stage by stage, just like we've done every other aspect of the business, and build it up. Because again, we know this is new technology, we know there is that element of trust that needs to be built, and we know what we've created is not only quality, but the most important aspect to us is that it's safe. And so that will take time. But it's time that we are willing to dedicate to it, and we will prove to everyone, no matter where they are, that this is the way forward, and this is how we can provide support to those who cannot receive it.
So how are you planning to sort of evaluate the product? How are you thinking about measuring outcomes?
So a few different ways, I guess they sort of go on a bit of a scale,
Yeah.
is using simple Likert scales to be able to understand the progression in each child's improvement of their condition over time. The second aspect is actually using more clinical studies, the DSM or the DAS, to be able to understand that as well. And the third is already talking to multiple top universities to do clinical studies and RCTs as the gold standard show that what we've created is effective and is safe.
So is InnerSteps available to the public now? Can I go get it?
Yeah, so there's a public version at the moment. At the moment, that was our sort of original test version, so it shows the functionality of what we're building, provides those custom stories. But I will say, as a bit of a sneak peek, and I haven't said too much before, is we are most of the way building through the new product, which will take everything that we've got and put it on a whole new level. We've got pictures, we have video, we have customized content that travels huge varieties of concerns, struggles, but also learnings. And so that'll be our new product that will be publicly available soon.
And so how will you distribute? Is it?
So and there's three different ways.
Yeah.
And the first one is direct to parents. So that's going through app stores, websites, providing them with the support they need at home and enabling that not only it's a support tool for each child, but that the parents can understand, we can provide them support, because a big aspect is that parents often feel lost in providing the support through it. The second one is going through schools in the more edtech space, that more preventative care, providing social emotional learning to young children in a way they actually want to read. And the third is through that more clinical aspect, providing clinicians with a tool they can use in clinic and also outside of clinic, and then also with hospitals and different aspects like that. And it'll be a progression as we move along. But the idea is that currently mental health platforms, or mental health as a whole, tends to be more siloed between those. What we can do is we can provide that unanimous, that unified support, that wherever a child is, whatever they're struggling with, we can help with that. We can connect them to the right people. We can provide the right support. And that's probably the biggest core of our journey.
So if we've got someone listening out there, they've got a passion project, they've had an idea and they've been sort of mulling over it. What was the best piece of advice that you were given at the early stages of your project that really maybe made a difference to you making this a reality?
I think something I was given, and that is only even more true now, is that just build. Create something. You can say your idea as much as you want, you can get people inspired about it, but if you can show them something, if you can illustrate that it works, even more so if you've got people who are actually using it and like using it, that is so much more powerful than any words could actually be. And as I mentioned, it's even easier with platforms like Lovable or Cursor, AI developers, that without any technical skill or with minimal, you can build out entire custom platforms in a way that, as I keep mentioning, just was never possible before.
We've talked about young kids as a sort of a totality. I'm interested if there's a particular evolution of your product that might be specific to the neurodivergent kids, for example. Also, you mentioned lots of cultures and languages. This is something that I think opens up the accessibility of your product to so many people. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of that specificity?
So yeah, I think firstly, in sort of neurodivergent side, as I mentioned, we'll have an NDIS certification soon. And that whole side is something that we know we can support, specifically within social stories, is an aspect that's already being done, and it's being done manually. And so we can provide that on a different scale and a different level of engagement and therapeutic effectiveness. And the second aspect is this is a tool, means we can provide support to any child anywhere. As I mentioned, over 100 languages, 5,000 cultural contexts. So whether you're in Sydney, whether you're in Perth, or whether you're in Namibia or Vietnam, we can provide that support, especially in the places that don't have access to that mental health infrastructure.
How do you make this economical for the family in Namibia? How do we do that?
So it's a few different ways. First of all, again, the start of the passion project, it will always be, the main aspect will always be free. So ensuring that we can provide that support to families is really, really, really important to us. And then we'll also work with top organizations like discussing with Save the Children to be able to distribute it throughout, and then also be able to provide it as a tool that if someone contacts us, we can provide the entire thing for free, just if they ask. And that's really important to us. We sort of went down the initial stages of understanding whether it's a not-for-profit or it's a commercial organization. And I'm of the firm belief that to make the most impact, you need to be commercially sustainable. And that's really important. And so I think that if we can integrate and keep this passion at the very core of what we do for the entire progress of the business, we can make this impact globally.
What do you wish you'd known before you started this?
It's funny, there's a lot that I wish I'd known, a lot of small things, but I think the biggest aspect is how important it is to work with parents, work with families, and actually get their understanding on, or their opinion on what needs to be the vital aspects of the product, how we can make it the best for them. And at the very, very start, again, really going back, is we built up the product that was exciting, it was a lot of fun, it was great, but it was a bit more of our vision. So I think the more we can talk to the people that are actually using it, the more effective. And that's something throughout the last year or so we've really taken to heart.
What does success for Jessie Waller look like?
Success is a big goal. Success is providing a platform that anyone, regardless of their location, their language, their financial situation, can access. We can provide support on the global scale to anyone who needs it in a way that wasn't possible before. So I know success is a big goal, but that's what success looks like to me.
Jessie Waller, great innovation. We're excited to follow your journey. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Louise. That was fantastic.
The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of myself and today's guest, and do not necessarily reflect the position of New South Wales Health. Any content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as endorsement or approval by the organisation. New South Wales Health does not endorse any products, services, or companies mentioned in this content.